have in the studio the Director-General, Franco Nigeria Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Moses Umaru. Thank you very much for your time on the show.
Great to be here.
Let's start this way before we go deep inside. Let's look at the timeliness, trying to return Nigeria to the January-December budget cycle. Many say this might be a step in the right direction. What do you think?
I totally agree. I was going to mention that at first, before you mentioned that one of the positives we can take out of the presentation of the budget 2 days ago by His Excellency the President of Nigeria is the fact that he's presenting it now. And we expect that the Senate would sign that would approve that so that it can be signed into law by December. So by January, we have a clear view as to the expenditure of the country from January to December, which gives us a proper ability to analyze the budget properly and see how it will go. It's a positive one. It has not been done in a very, very long time, so it sends the right signal as far as the Nigerian business environment is concerned.
Sending the right signal, so one way or the other, that can also help proper implementation when we start in good time, right?
Of course, I totally agree. And one of the beautiful things about the presentation of the budget is the fact that the President accompanied the presentation with a finance bill. And the finance bill it's a beauty, even though we don't have the totality of the document. One of the highlights of the finance bill is that the fact that we're going to align our own tax system to international standards. Of course, the issue of double taxation that has been an issue over time, of course, should be eliminated. And that thing that really caught our fancy as far as the Chamber of Commerce is concerned, is the fact that there's going to be tax incentives for companies investing in infrastructure and the capital market. That is good for PPP, public-private partnership. Of course, companies will definitely want to come in, knowing fully well that this bill will come into law, and definitely we can be able to have, the company go in and all of that again.
Now, reading through this, I saw that this budget is to ensure equitable sharing of economic prosperity, inclusive growth. We have debt servicing at 2.45 trillion naira. That, to me, is on the other side.
If you look at let's talk about the assumptions of the budget first of all.
Yeah, I wanted us to do, okay, fine. Those assumptions, yes, of course, we need to look at them.
Yes,
how feasible do you see them playing out?
Okay. I'll first of all go to your question as to
the debt servicing. It's really worrisome.
Debt servicing is worrisome. Though if you look at debt to GDP is below 20%, of course we can sit at that, but that doesn't matter because we look at the statistic debt servicing to revenue ratio. Debt servicing to revenue ratio currently is around 75 to 80%. So for every 100 naira generated in this country, 80 naira is used to service our debt. And we're not talking about the principal, we're talking about servicing current debt and all of that. It is not sustainable. And as part of the budget proposition, the government still wants to borrow further. I don't think there's room for borrowing anymore as far as the Nigerian environment is concerned. If you look at recurrent expenditure, we need to begin to reduce the cost of governance in this country. We need to 4.88 trillion recurrent expenditure. Of course, 80% of it is salaries.
Of course.
And all of that.
Minimum wage.
Minimum
there
wage.
There is an increase.
Of course. So we need to begin to reduce government spending. If you look at MDA's allocation, let's pick something. Health, 49 billion. Interior, 30 billion. That of trade and investment, 40 billion. Put the three together, and which goes to the Senate, 125 billion. That doesn't send the right signal at all. Instead, we call it the madness of many for the benefit of few at the end of the day. We need to ensure that we reduce government spending. Government spending has to go down. Put funds in health. We're talking about universal health care a few days ago, and the government should ensure that they put 15% of the national budget on health. That is not happening now. Even currently, 2020 budget is less than 5%. It's not sustainable. Debt servicing, terrible.
Okay, let's take a break. And when we return, of course, we have more for you on Business Nigeria. Don't go away. It's your Business Nigeria. We're glad to have you back. I still have with me in the studio the Director-General, Franco Nigeria, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, talking critically on this 2020 budget and what we should expect. Now, let's go to the assumptions. $57 per barrel, 2.18 million barrels per day. 305 to $1 have issues with that. But I think for the crude oil per barrel and also crude oil production per day, I think it's a little bit conservative.
No, I don't think so myself. 2 days ago, the global energy report came out and predicted in 2020 that we're going to have the price of oil will average $54 $0.4 per barrel in a day and all of that. They just reviewed that because, of course, they had it at 64 before now, looking at the Saudi Arabia crisis and all of that, and the fact that there's going to be less supply of crude oil into the market. But I think if you look at the assumptions of the budget, I think personally, or we think from the Franco Nigerian Chamber of Commerce, that these things are overly optimistic. And these assumptions might not necessarily hold. Of course, we know that even during the year, OPEC was going to cut our level of oil production, our level of oil export to 1.7 million barrels per day. And of course, if you look at 2020, we are budgeting 2.13 million barrels per day. Is that going to be possible at the end of the day? Anything can come up and all of that. So these are things that are overly optimistic, and I think that the Senate, before they approve and they go into these things, need to look at that and ensure that they can bring these prices down a bit so we can have a more realistic budget as far as the Nigerian environment is concerned.
I'm worried about the exchange rate assumed at 305. Many say that we should just allow this foreign currency, talking about the exchange rate, to find its level. That the central bank has for months, years now, tried to defend the naira. Do you agree with that school of thought that thinks that they should allow the currency float?
Yes, of course, the central bank has continued to defend the naira, and we are of the opinion that I think we support that a bit, because there are basic assumptions that support, a managed floating system. If you look at, for example, the Nigerian environment, we have infrastructure gap, and we have a lot of gaps as far as the environment is concerned. If you allow the currency to have a free float, there will be a lot of inflation as far as the economy is concerned. A lot of below middle class income will suffer a lot and all of that. So I think the government needs to continue defending the naira, but at the same time, let them be a dual approach. At the same time, you're defending the naira, ensure that you're fixing infrastructure. So after a while, if we have a stable infrastructure in the economy, we have stable power, and we have good routes, of course, it can allow the currency to float. But the assumptions to allow a free floating currency currently now is going to be catastrophic for the economy.
So we are doing 2.14 trillion naira for capital expenditure in this budget, and we want to invest in critical infrastructure, human capital development, job creation. We're talking about 100 million jobs in 10 years. Is that what we're looking at? That was what the president said.
Yes.
At a point. So that's about 10 million every year. How well are we positioned for this? The private sector sure have an important role to play in all of this.
2.14 trillion naira capital expenditure doesn't send the right signal to an economy.
Not at all.
It's very bad. Every analyst that has looked at that, you look at your recurrent, it's almost ×2 of your capital expenditure in the economy. It doesn't tell me that you really want to push the economy to the level you want the economy to be, and it's not a good sign. But I think the only compensation, what can only compensate for it, I think, is the finance bill that was proposed into the budget that we said, okay, fine, that there's going to be tax incentive for investors in infrastructure. Let's hope that that can can encourage investment in that sector and see it can match it out. But 2.14 trillion as capital, while recurrent is 4.83 trillion, it's just, it's very bad.
That's where we now come back to the issue of review of the VAT, where they're trying to look for funds to pay salaries, minimum wage, and all of that. So from 5%, we're moving to 7.5%. There's this argument that Nigeria still remains the lowest when it comes to an African country, when it comes to that rate. And I think that is true, because research shows that that is really true. But many are still saying that, why don't we try to expand our tax net? Manage what we have, the inflows we have, other than raising it from 5 to 7.5. Whichever way, what do you make of our tax policy and how we can add up positively to this budget?
Before you talk about the tax policy of us getting the lowest VAT in Africa, let's look at the level of double taxation in the Nigerian economy, first of all. They're taxing you from here, you get to the toll, they're taxing you from there again and all of that. Look at the number of tax you pay before you can even...
Tolls will come back.
Yeah, of course, tolls definitely are going to come back, and all of that. And of course, next year we're expecting a lot of increment, even in electricity tariffs and the rest of them, and all of that. We'll talk about the inflation later, but now let's talk about the VAT. I do not have a problem, or we do not have a problem, if the government is saying that you're going to increase VAT for the purpose of infrastructure. But when you are increasing VAT for the purpose of salary payments, when the revenue from VAT is going to recurrent expenditure again, It's not right. It's not right for any economy. It's not right for any economy. I think what we need to do as far as broadening the tax net is concerned, of course, let's broaden the tax net. There are a lot of people that are not in the tax net currently. We have to broaden the tax net. But before then, let's ensure that the proceeds from taxation is used for infrastructural development. Let the common man on the street feel the impact of government taxation policy, and not that you pay salaries to some fat cats in Abuja.
I say that thing sometimes, that aside some states like Lagos and few other states, Ogun now is also getting on that track.
Yeah.
You really don't see what government's been doing, you know, talking about using tax monies, funds gotten from taxation. Now, moving on, DG, what are your expectations? We have an economic advisory committee led by Professor Doyin Salami. Everybody expects a lot from this committee. They met with the president yesterday, and a lot of revelations, a lot of, you know, discourse, you know, all about revamping the Nigerian economy. What do you expect from this team? What do you think should be their quick wins? Looking at, you know, how they can synergize with also the fiscal side, the ministers and all of that are also at work now to get Nigeria working.
Now we need to ensure that whatever policy we have in Nigeria is being felt by the man on the street. There has to be a trickle-down effect of government policy.
Very important.
It needs to
put
go,
food on
yes,
people's table.
it needs to go down. Currently, if you look at the average Nigerian middle-class income, for example, they are their government. They provide generators for their power. Most of the times, they fix their own roads in their estates and all of that. So government policy, as far as infrastructure is concerned, doesn't trickle down to. So what I would say for the Economic Advisory Council is that whatever policy you're bringing, ensure that the policy has an effect on the common man of the streets. And that is exactly what we need in this country to set the country rolling and all of that. Let's focus on infrastructure. Leave other policies. Everything okay, you can tax businesses if they have power. 50% of business costs go straight to power. So now, businesses will be more confident if you increase their taxation, if they have constant supply of electricity. So let's focus on the main problems and leave the rest. Everything will fall in place. That's how the things will work.
Indeed, because I really see, I'm looking forward to how this budget would play out, and, you know, we get this inclusive growth and, you know, key job creation, how we can get more jobs, because all the ministers are I think they have a mandate to make sure that whatever they do trickles down to the man on the streets and jobs are being, you know, made available, because that figure is staggering. You're looking at our population rising and our GDPs on the other side. You want to say something?
Now, you can't say something in terms of policy, and then when you release the facts, which is your budget in figures, it does not reflect the policy. There is a dissonance between the policy and the figures. The figures are not speaking your policy. We saw the figures that came out from the budget. Is that going to bring about the necessary change we want? The answer is a no. It's not possible. Now we're looking at borrowings. Of course, you're going to borrow more, definitely. And you're going to borrow more for a recurrent expenditure. Are you borrowing more for capital expenditure? And all of that, the economy is not being open currently. So we are almost going to say it's going to be status quo in 2020. Almost saying that. It's so easy to say that.
And there's also fear globally. Let's leave it at that, DG. I'll have another day to look critically at projections, talking about recession globally, African continent, and all of that. We'll break it down one of these days. DG, the Franco Nigeria Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Moses Umoru there, breaking it down, looking at the 2020 document and what we should expect